From Godzilla and Kong to aliens and predators, many monsters have thrilled us over the past 4 decades. And then there's the obvious mention of monsters like mummies and werewolves. However, many tend to forget that most of the epic cinematic monsters were conceptualized and brought to life during the era of black and white cinema, and these films were not only visually terrifying but also cinematically influential and important. Movies like 1932's The Mummy and 1954's Godzilla changed the way people watched films and directors made them. In this video, we will explore the greatest monster and creature horror films that were born in the black and white era. But before we begin, please consider subscribing to us. It's a small click from you, but it goes a long way for us. Now, let's cut to the chase, shall we?
He was a king and a god in the world he knew. But now he comes to civilization. Ladies and gentlemen, look at Kong.
Number 1, King Kong 1933. A famous film director named Carl Denham assembled a crew and went to Skull Island to find a mysterious entity named Kong. However, Kong was brutal and violent and required a bride, who was basically a tribal woman, offered as a sacrifice to him. When the crew reached Skull Island, Carl's beautiful heroine was abducted by the tribals and offered as a sacrifice to her. Kong abducted her and fled deep into the jungles, only to be followed by Carl and a small rescue party. In their pursuit of Kong, the crew encounters several dinosaurs and monstrous creatures, but ultimately manages to rescue Anne, the heroine. Kong followed them to the village, where Kong was knocked unconscious with a gas bomb and taken to New York to be displayed at Broadway Theater. And, it's not a surprise that carnage was about to spread its deadly wings. Considered by many as the greatest monster horror film of all time, the 1933 King Kong paved the way for modern creature features in more ways than one. The film is obviously the granddaddy of monster-on-the-loose films, but it's more than a technical achievement because it's a touching fable about a monster who wants to do the right thing, but in its own beastly way. Number 2, Godzilla, 1954. After several ships disappear or get destroyed near Odo Island in Japan, the villagers witness the shock of their lives in the form of a giant ancient creature or Godzilla. It had been disturbed due to underwater atomic bomb testing and had surfaced itself, transforming into a terrestrial creature from a sea creature. The monster destroyed several villages and reached Tokyo, where it used its atomic breath to destroy a 30-meter-tall wall that was electrified with a 50,000-volt charge. Realizing that killing the creature wasn't possible through firepower or nuclear weapons, the government took the help of a scientist named Daisuke Serizawa, who planned to use an oxygen destroyer. However, Serizawa faces several dilemmas about the use of a powerful superweapon. Ishiro Honda's film was an ingenious piece of a horror film that was visually so rich and vivid that it led to numerous gimmicky ripoffs and a few well-made contemporary films. Although portrayed as a monster flick, it was every bit a film that explored post-war emotional conflicts and the mind-melting horrors of atomic warfare. Having said that, as the first film of the Godzilla franchise, Honda's film can be called a minor classic that blurs the line between pure pleasure and human loss. Number 3, Frankenstein, 1931. With the help of his assistant Fritz, Dr. Henry Frankenstein carries out an experiment to join together body parts of dead people, including the brain, to create a new human being.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
He retrieved these body parts from the corpses found at graveyards and from that of recently hanged criminals. However, the brain that Dr. Frankenstein used came from a murderous criminal.
The brain that was stolen from my laboratory was a criminal brain.
Upon learning about Frankenstein's monster, his friends and family members ask him to undo his experiments.
What can we do? Kill it, as you would any savage animal. We must overpower him first.
And he agrees to kill the creature painlessly, but before that, Frankenstein's monster escaped and inadvertently killed a little girl. Learning about this, the townsfolk resolved to slay Frankenstein's monster. Directed by James Whale and based on Mary Shelley's famous novel, Frankenstein is a deservedly chilling and celebrated account of a monster that was misjudged by the very society that created him. Packed with iconic moments and a heartbreaking story, the film is equal parts terrifying and pathetic. It's by far the most influential horror film ever made and is a must-watch for every horror fan and unmissable for anyone who loves films. Number 4, The Mummy, 1932. After finding the mummy of an ancient Egyptian high priest named Imhotep, a reckless archaeologist opens the mummy, only to read from the Book of the Dead and resurrect Imhotep, who was cursed and mummified alive because of trying to reanimate his lover, Anck-su-namun. 10 years later, Imhotep had assimilated with bodies and posed as an Egyptian historian named Ardith Bey. He soon discovers a half-Egyptian woman named Helen, who was the spitting image of Anck-su-namun. Imhotep now plans to kill her, mummify her, and resurrect her so that he can be reunited with his lover for eternity. Karl Freund's 1932 original will remain the definitive masterpiece of the Mummy franchise surely because the film picturized and brought to life the classic muslin-clad, undead, zombie high priest. Of course, Brandon Fraser's films came as a breath of fresh air. But then, he was heavily Indiana-zoned. On the other hand, the 1932 film was made to send chills down the audience of its time, and it continues to do so even today, should you choose to watch it. Also, you may want to check out its sequels. Number 5, The Wolf Man, 1941. Larry Talbot returns to his ancestral home in Wales to bury his brother and reconcile with Sir John Talbot, his estranged father.
Father, I'm sorry about John.
He soon falls in love with a local girl named Gwen,
Well, maybe if you took a little walk with me, I could tell your fortune.
and learns from her about the tale of werewolves. Things go south when Larry gets bitten by a werewolf while rescuing Gwen's friend. Furthermore, having been bitten by a werewolf and living to see the light of day, Larry himself turns into a werewolf and goes on a rampage. He begs his father, Sir John Talbot, to restrain him in chains so that he doesn't kill again, but are chains enough to stop a deadly monster. Directed by George Wagner and starring Lon Chaney Jr., the film was, and still is, the most influential film on werewolves. This 1941 film gave the world the character of Larry Talbot, around whom several films have been made, including the 2010 film The Wolfman. Although the 1941 original attempts to sell a superstitious tale, its compactly knit horror is believable and chilling. But the success of the film lies in its monster that's an amalgamation of witchcraft, lycanthropic folklore, and Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Help me.
That was all in today's video. Do hang around and check our other videos for awesome movie recommendations. Have a good one.